Right now, we're going to welcome our next live guest with our weekly representation from Metaphora. We've got Rush Feldhacker with us, talking to us a little bit about the changing nature of the RFP. So, Rush, thank you for joining us on the show. Great to see you guys from Metaphora, as always.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Good morning, Rush. Let's jump into this. We're talking today about the changing nature of the RFP. You know, when in the height of the pandemic and the changes that were going on, we saw this shorter cycle for the RFPs, right? Is that the trend that's going on now?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that we're going to see more and more shippers move away from the annualized RFP and go to more frequent bidding cycles, even quarterly. I just think that the volatility in the market over the last couple of years is incentivizing them to do so.
So let's talk about some of those challenges with the current process, right? We've kind of figured out that the way that things were done pre-pandemic, not necessarily that we're in post-pandemic times right now because things like still haven't normalized, but it wasn't working out. And so a lot of shippers, a lot of carriers have gone to kind of this, let's figure it out system, and that changes the way that their RFP cycle is done. What are some of those challenges and even some of those successes that we've seen come out of this?
So from a shipper perspective, the volatility in the market can make contracted rates quickly outdated. And from a brokerage perspective, it's always been challenging to quote an annual bid, as they're really just guessing around what the market's going to do over the next 12 months. Those annualized rates are very speculative. So for both the shipper and the broker or the carrier, the time and resources that go into performing an RFP are very high as well. But there are a lot of new RFP tools, freight tech, and solutions available out there than there have been in the past. So that becomes less of a barrier.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier than doing just, spreadsheets, right? I mean, there's more tools than just Excel to be able to analyze the lanes and do these bid process. But it begs a question to me, at least in my mind, why not just change that annual bid, keep it annual, but understand that there are fluctuations that normally happen within that season and allow for that kind of living, breathing annual type of bid. Does that not make sense, or is it better to just keep going through these bid cycles?
No, I think, if you have stable, consistent lanes, you can go annual. But what shippers are seeing over the last several years is when we had increasing rates over the last 2 years that even hit some all-time highs, a lot of those annualized pricing was just kind of worthless. It wasn't usable. And then as we're seeing rates decline right now, they're incentivized to do more and more RFPs to lock in those lower rates. So the annual RFP might make sense on stable lanes, but you're either going to not be able to depend on that capacity because rates get too high, or you're going to be overpaying because rates have gotten a lot lower than when you locked in those contracted rates.
We just finished up talking with Mary O'Connell, who's our 3PL expert, and she was kind of diving into broker compensation and the differences of broker compensation based on your geographical area and some of those discrepancies. And I think that the way that you kind of handle your bid cycle can have a really huge effect on how much money you're making, whether that's in a margin perspective or what you fight for in your base salary. Can you talk a little bit about how, as a broker, you should understand the changing nature of the RFP cycle and be flexible enough to adapt to it, especially if you want to keep making cash?
Right. The ex-brokerage guy in me cringes at the thought of doing RFPs 2 to 4 times more frequently than I had to, but in the past. But the days of having a sales rep stay late and plug in thousands of manual rates using an Excel sheet and like one external pricing tool like that should be over. So this change isn't necessarily a bad thing for brokers. Shorter bid cycles allow brokers to be less speculative in their pricing. So if I owned a 3PL right now, there's definitely some questions I'd ask myself, like, what tools do I have to quote these bids in a timely and accurate way? And if I don't have one already, do I need to get a pricing director or a pricing team, or am I going to continue to lean on my sales and ops teams doing that, knowing it's going to take them longer and won't be as accurate? And then lastly, do I have accurate and clear internal pricing and rating data? So some brokerages have excellent data integrity and reporting around internal rating, and some don't. But those that do, that can trust their internal rating, which I believe is probably the most accurate pricing tool you can use, are going to have a leg up as this shift occurs.
So you mentioned the ex-broker in you. Let's talk a little bit about that perspective that you kind of offer uniquely in moving from the consulting side of things, or from the brokerage side of things into the consulting side of things. Because I think that sometimes as consultants, it's easy to sit there and be like, this is what you should do, right? I'm your consultant, listen to me. But when you have that first person experience and you've done your time in the trenches building RFPs, maybe on an annual cycle, on a more frequent than annual cycle, you offer that little bit of extra perspective. How is that received from people that you guys are helping in this type of market? And then how, as a consultant, do you serve clients better with that firsthand perspective?
I don't think that I could provide the value needed to consult in this space without having been in it. It's such a unique industry. Me and the rest of the industry team at Metaphora have actually sat in those seats. All of us have worked in brokerage or in transportation before. And it's not just the knowledge that we get from having done that, but it's also our network. I think that's our greatest resource. And leaning on that network that I've built over being in brokerage for 13 years is probably my greatest resource. And I wouldn't be as valuable as I need to be without it as we try to solve some of these complex problems that our customers have.
Right, Rush. So the impacts to the different companies, whether they be the shipper or the carriers or the brokers, as we move towards, it seems, these shorter cycle RFPs, right? We heard Shelley Simpson talk in Northwest Arkansas at our last event about how they themselves have lowered their expectations or their confidence levels in their bid process because of the changes in the prices, et cetera. So how does that impact, and what does that look like on the financial departments, the forecasting departments, et cetera, when you have a bid that used to be 60%, 70% confidence or whatever, in that volume and or that capacity because it was an annual bid. Now you're talking about a short 3-month or 6-month bid. That forecasting becomes exponentially more difficult. What are the impacts there?
So I think that as you move to like a 3 to 6 month bid, your pricing is actually, you should have a little bit more confidence in it. So when you sit there in November at an annualized bid and you're trying to guess what pricing is going to be a year from now, your confidence just isn't going to be as high as, hey, I'm quoting this, I'm in Q2 and I'm quoting this for Q3. Mm-hmm. You're going to be a little bit more accurate there, especially if you have clean internal data that you can lean on. You have the necessary freight tech out there. You have sources like Sonar, for example, that you can kind of look at for a more recent history than trying to look at what happened in 2022 and make guesstimates on what's going to happen in 2023 with the market.
So then when you sit here and you see pricing power kind of pendulum swing back between the shipper and the carrier, if you're a broker sitting in the middle and you're trying to navigate this more frequent RFP bid cycle in a market that gets more and more volatile each day, how do you choose kind of where to put your most confidence? Are you more reliant on taking care of your carrier, or are you more reliant on taking care of your shipper in this type of thing? Or should you sit there and try and be truly in the middle and say, you know what, I'm working both sides, I'm going to take the best care of both of these guys as I can?
So it's always just a delicate balance. I think communication is absolutely key in this. But I think as we move to shorter bid cycles, the relationship you have with your customer is even more critical than it was before. So right now, it's going to be easier for a shipper to try out a new broker or carrier. It's not as much of a commitment to have a new carrier come on and award them a quarterly lane than it would be to award them an annual lane. And then a shorter bid cycle also means that your awards are under attack. And so you might have 3 loads a day from Chicago to Milwaukee that are dedicated to you, and you have a dedicated carrier on, and you also backhaul that carrier back from Milwaukee. Well, if you lose that one load, you're going to lose those other loads as well. So it's important to have a customer relationship where you can go to them and you can price match, or you can negotiate on rate to keep certain target lanes of yours from being included in the RFP.
Yeah, it certainly seems that this would put some pressure or a greater emphasis on that relationship building to gain better confidence as you go through as a legacy or even a new carrier, right? It gives you or a new broker. It gives a new broker's more entries during the year into the business, right? I mean, there's many. I remember starting brokerage before where hey, just you're going to have to wait 8 months till we rebid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the companies that have those aggressive sales teams that are looking at this as like prime opportunity to add to their contracted freight portfolio are going to have a lot of success. There's going to be more entry points, and you can attack those lanes more often. So, like I said, the ex-customer sales guy in me would be very, very excited about this. But at the same time, it's always scary to know that you could be losing a cornerstone of your network or your density, every 3 months.
Right.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome, Rush. Well, thank you for joining us today. If folks want to get in touch with you guys at Metaphor and get some of those services, where can they go to do that?
So you can actually reach out to me on LinkedIn or request a free discovery call with us. And then if you want to learn more about this topic, there's actually a webinar coming out that I did with LoadSmart and JBF Consulting about this topic. That should be coming out in the next few weeks, so keep an eye out for that.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Rush.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.